get this started, we are recording this session that we were going to provide to our members later on and then throughout the process and have it on our website. So, first I want to take a minute to thank you for coming on. I know you guys have a lot to do. Even when you're back in South Carolina, there's still a lot on your plate. It's not like you're sitting around waiting for something to do. But, Congressman, I know we talked about this not long after you were elected when you made a visit to Sumter, but we knew each other a long time ago when I was at the York County Regional Chamber, and you were actually on our board of the chamber, and just a private businessman at the time, not really hadn't dove into the elected official part yet. But it's great to have you in our delegation, and we greatly appreciate what you've been doing for Sumter as well as all of South Carolina. So first of all, thank you for that.
I'm honored to do it, Chris. Thank you. It's Sumter's a good town. Y'all got a lot of good things going on, and as we move forward and get out of this pandemic, let us know how we can help. We've helped. My day has been spent, even though we have not been called back to Congress, my day is spent with helping businesses who are having trouble applying for the loan, following it through with the banks, and helping, getting it done. And it's been a full-time job. I'm found out today the farmers are going to be eligible for the EIDL loan, the economic injury disaster relief fund that they can get. And so our office can help any of you people that are having trouble. Give us a call. We'll be glad to help out.
Well, I appreciate that. And what we did was, instead of allowing people to ask all different types of questions, because we thought that might cause a little bit of havoc while we're trying to have this type of discussion, we accepted questions prior to, and of course, all of them are in regards to the federal response to the pandemic. They cover the CARES Act, the SBA disaster assistance recovery loans, the payroll protection loans, and a couple of other things. I'll start with the CARES Act and the stimulus package that has been sent out to the citizens based on their income levels from their previous year's tax returns. How would you, from your opinion, how would you guesstimate the success of that particular program?
Oh, it's very successful. The PPP particularly. People are having trouble with payroll, and should you let the employees go? Should you keep them? This was a lifeline that was divided up 75-25 with the way that employers were paying their employees and keeping them on for the 8 weeks. So we had some headwinds with the banks initially, because their issue was they were hit with thousands of loans requests, and it just took a while to get through the paperwork. But gradually this second phase has gone smoother than the first phase. And I think banks, we're telling everybody, I think there's over $2 billion left now, that if they need to apply, to go ahead and do it, and ask the banks that they're going to, do they have the capacity to process the loan? And if they do, get a timetable. And banks are having to, adjust on the fly as well, because most of them are working remotely, which is a challenge in and of itself. And but it's been a success. Everybody hadn't gotten what they wanted, but I think the second round particularly, it was a good turned out well for most people.
Well,
Kathy Rose,
Congressman, can I jump in just a minute?
Yeah, that's who I was calling on.
Yeah.
This is Kathy Rose Hicklin, Chris, and Ariel, who's processed all of our applications or helped people through the process. And Kathy Rose, take it.
Well, first of all, the Congressman is right. The second round has gone much smoother than the first round, because the SBA and the banks have modified their transmission system of loan applications. They also are, second time around, it's always, what the kinks are, and it's a much smoother process. The borrowers are much more collected in their information, what the bank has to have in order to get these loans processed. and they're much more organized in giving the lenders what they need in a more timely manner, whereas the first time around, no one was real sure what information the SBA would require, and everybody was just much more prepared. And yes, to date, there is approximately $120 billion left for PPP applications. We have also, the banks are still waiting to hear back from some of their loans, but I also wanted to say the first round, we recognize that the lenders such as PayPal, Cabbage, and Square began accepting applications, and we found out through customers or through constituents that it was easier for them to apply through these organizations, where one was not restricted by having a checking account or a loan, active loan, and they received money through those three lenders as well. So I want to make sure that everyone knew it didn't have to be just your bank. There are also other options out there.
Okay, I'll go back to the payroll protection program here in a second, but in regards to the stimulus package that first came out, I guess it was 2 or 3 trillion that came out as far as the payments to the citizens, if based on their income and all that. There's been word, and I don't think it's actually had a lot of progress so far, but there was word not long ago that there was a new package that had been introduced and sponsored by a couple of congressmen in regards to monthly payments to citizens until this is done, or at least through, say, July. Has there gotten any, I can't imagine what that would do to the federal debt, although all of this has already added a good bill to it. But has there been any progress for that, or is it just pretty much something that was introduced and hasn't gotten any legs?
It hasn't gotten any traction. She's Ms. Pelosi, and the audience needs to know she controls pretty much all the committees and what's being proposed. But I've heard that. I've heard aid to the state governments. I've heard, different funds, different dollars being thrown about in trillions of dollars to, help the states. And that's going to be a tough pull for most of if not all of the Republicans. But that particular legislation has not come about. We hadn't voted on it.
Okay. You mentioned local governments. There's also been word recently as far as a new package or an upcoming package to assist actual municipalities and county governments on a local level. What do you foresee happening with that?
I think it'll be proposed. What all of us are looking for now, particularly like Kathy Rose said, we've got dollars still left on the PPP. The idle loans are available for farmers. We've still got money that can be applied for. We've got to address at some point before any more money is let out, how are we going to address this budget-wise? We just cannot keep adding to this. That's why a lot of us are calling to go back. I'm on the budget committee, and let's start getting cuts in place, just like South Carolina's going to have to do. There's going to have to be some tremendous cuts to the budgets. Every line item in South Carolina's got to address that now. I think I heard yesterday they're going back next week, but it's budget time, and it's time to see what, who's going to get what. Unfortunately, politics does enter into it. Ms. Pelosi is going to be pushing for states that she wants to push. And where do you stop that? I mean, the question I and a lot of others have, this is a slippery slope. Where does this end up? And again, where are we going to get the money? Where are we going to get the money for the money that's already out there? Are going to be the tough issues.
And Chris.
Yeah, go ahead.
If you don't mind, this is Jake with Congressman Norman's office. It's particularly regarding the local municipalities and counties. I mean, we've been in constant discussion with the National County Association and with the governor's office, and I mean, we were on a call with the Sumter County Administrator and Lancaster and Union and a bunch of those folks as well. And The governor, actually, the state has received their, I guess, portion of the state and local funding from the CARES Act. It's roughly about $2 billion. And I've been in daily contact with the governor's office, and they're determining the best methods and how best to distribute that money. Because I think Greenville County was the only one that met the 500,000 threshold. So they're working. The governor's office is working to figure out how best to distribute that amongst all the municipalities and counties, cities, et cetera, across the state. And I think last I heard, late last week, they were waiting on some final guidance from the Treasury Department, just so they don't start sending money and then guidance come out and then retroactively they may have to resend it or move it elsewhere, things like that. So the governor does have the $2 billion that they're figuring out how best to disperse amongst the localities across the state as well.
Yeah, we had Representative Merle Smith and Senator Thomas McElveen on yesterday. As you know, Representative Smith is the chair of the House Ways and Means Committee, and we talked a little bit about the budget and the surplus that they went into this year, and a lot of organizations requesting monies for various things, additional funding, and how that money is now gone, and those requests are now invalid. So I know it's got to be tough, as well as what they're going to be facing when they go back into session next week. Not with just the state's response, also Santee Cooper, the budget and what they're going to be able to do as far as the cuts that they're going to have to make. So yeah, we don't envy any decisions that they're going to have to start making again come next week. Mr. Congressman, in regards to the SBA disaster assistance recovery loans, there's some people that, we've been getting a lot of questions here over the last several weeks that there's been some confusion about the difference between the disaster assistance recovery loans and the payroll protection loans. Could you talk about how those are handled on the national basis so our people can get a better understanding? Because there's some people that think that they've kind of had them confused. Where the banks are actually processing the SBA, the disaster loans, but yet they have to apply directly for the payroll protection. Can you describe for everybody the difference between those two?
Well,
Congressman, can I jump in? Do you mind?
Sure. Yeah.
That's Chris, that's a favorite subject of mine. The EIDL loans, what they're called, the EIDL loans, are your standard SBA disaster lending tool. They go to Hawaii when they have volcanoes, or Colombia when Matthew came through. This lending tool has been around for decades with the SBA. People can go online on the web to the SBA site and go to the EIDL loan site and make application. And it is very easy to do so. That EIDL loan, the funding actually shut down about the same time the PPP loans did, but then again, it opened back up, and it has a cash advance of $10,000. They limited that. They came back and modified that to $1,000 per employee, but it can be on a 30-year term. It's at approximately a 4% interest rate. And we learned, it'll be 3 weeks this coming Friday, from Greg White, who is the SBA director in South Carolina, that anyone who had an EIDL loan confirmation number beginning in 3, that their loan was being reviewed and processed. Now, the timing on this has been very different than first applied. Know that the SBA was not prepared and did not realize that they were going to have as many applicants. Know that 57 to 60,000 loan applications are made each year to the EIDL loan SBA. To date, the EIDL loans have received the same amount of number of applications as they would have received in 14 years.
Wow.
So yeah, 14 years worth of idle loan applications. So here again, just as with the stimulus checks and the IRS, the states and their unemployment systems, SBA was not set up to handle the massive amount of loan applications. I am beginning to see progress. I am excited to say that during the end of last week, I had constituents calling in who had applied either during the first hour or back on May 27th or 28th, and their loans are now being funded. I've also, since last weekend, had 2 more loans where I was working with constituents. Their loans are being funded. So a pattern is forming, and depending on what date they made that loan application online at the SBA site, it's taking approximately 30 to 45 days. And that was my guesstimate, having been on the lending side of SBA. SBA loans traditionally take a little bit longer. And here again, the PPP loans, to answer your question, this was a brand spanking new product that was rolled out to address the immediate needs of small business owners. And as you have seen, once they got this loan, many, quote, small businesses, according to the SBA definition of small business, they realized they could not make the certification. Actually, it was supposed to be May 7th. They have extended that till May 14th. And the certification was that we really don't have the assets or the liquidity, so that's why we need the loan. So many businesses, as you have seen, and as I have seen, have given the money back because they cannot make that certification.
Well, that's a good point.
Does that answer your question?
It does, and that kind of brings me to my next point in regards to the payroll protection loans. There's been, I'm sure y'all dealt with this in Washington as well as Rock Hill, and we've been dealing with it here in Sumter since this came about. We've obviously, you mentioned earlier, there's still some money left in the second phase of the payroll protection program. And the majority of the questions that we have received here at the chamber is that, how come I have not, I applied on the first day of the first phase when it was first launched, and I still have not received any monies. And, and I'm trying to communicate to these people that, they need to, if they want those questions answered, they need to reach out to the bank that they originally submitted their application through, because they're going to have those answers as far as what the status is of their application, why have they not received any funds yet, whatever the case may be. And that's something
you could not be any more correct.
Yeah.
I thank you so much for saying that, because the PPP loans are in conjunction with the bank or the lender.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to know the answer to that question, you have got to go to the bank, because the bank, the lender you were dealing with, submitted that loan or request to the SBA. They would have gotten back a confirmation if the loan went through or if the loan did not go through, because of who knows what requirements were not met. They would know.
Yeah.
Now, I will say some of the larger banks where people have had huge concerns, they make application on the bank's website and they do not go through a certain lender, or they don't know the lender. It has been extremely hard to get confirmation as to, well, did I get it or not? And so what we have done is, here again, the last 2 days of the first round, when those 3 other options came out with PayPal, Square, and Cabbage, they said, well, we're scared to go and file another application. Well, don't be scared. Go ahead and file the application with one of those 3, and whichever loan hits and is approved first, that's who the SBA is going to go with. So even if you have filed application with a bank, then go ahead, and I encourage you to file with another entity, if you will, because and then you're going to have to choose whether or not you want to accept that loan.
Chris, that's real important. People don't realize you've got to get that dialogue going with the bank and just know up front. Some of them were set up, some of them were not. It's a work in progress. And I know that a lot of people were critical of some customers who got the loan quicker, but they had their accounts already set up. It was just easier to process. But that's not a reason to give up. And particularly, you got a lot of farmers in Sumter who, are having a rough year, and that's where, again, these idle loans come in. Mm-hmm. But the Triple P, there's money available, and Kathy Rose and Jake can really, if they've got a question, to call our office and we can walk them through it.
And I sat on a webinar that the South Carolina Chamber had with Senator Graham and Senator Scott last week or the week before, and it was mentioned that there's a possibility that there could be a phase 3, even a possibility of a phase 4 in regards to the payroll protection programs, and that they were going to, of course, the amounts would be less than what they have been in the first two, and that they were going to try to focus more on, getting that money to real small businesses, because y'all know there's been some issues with maybe some businesses receiving monies that maybe they didn't necessarily need it based on, cash flow and assets and things like that, compared to your true small businesses, your 25 employees or less, or your 50 employees or less, that desperately needed it to, to retain workers and keep their doors open, compared to some others that maybe, let's say, did not necessarily need it for those purposes. Or do you know of any progress on that, or is that a possibility, or is there funding for that?
Well, the Senate's talking about it, but again, we hadn't met, so we'll take it up when we get back. But it's got to come from originate in the House. The Senate's taking the lead on it, but all the funding comes through with the House. We need to get our committees back in place to talk about it. But what the public and what your residents in Sumter, as well as all over South Carolina, need to know, there's money still available that has not been spent, that they need to, if they want to apply for or think they need it, they need to get it in. And again, our office can help on that.
And sir, if you don't mind if I jump in as well, and Chris, kind of touching to your point, and also what Kathy Rose mentioned earlier, and the congressman as well, the second phase is working much better and more intended to what it originally was supposed to do. I think the average loan size in South Carolina for the PPP was about $70,000. Compared to the first one, the first phase, where I think it was closer to like $1 million or something. So we are seeing that money trickle down, and there's dialogue originating in both chambers a little bit, but primarily in the Senate, just because typically how it's been working, if they strike their bipartisan deal in the Senate, it's easier to move it through the House, just from a numbers standpoint. So there is discussion doing it, and I know there's a lot of talk of fixing a lot of the, I don't want to say like glitches in the system, but kind of what you said, like ensuring the money is trickling down to the true mom and pop restaurants and shops and businesses as well. And for example, SBA, and I think that will be implemented in a phase 4, as the senators had mentioned, because last week, the SBA, I think it was on Thursday or Friday, they specifically carved out a time that banks and lenders with assets below $10 billion can submit their applications. And that was a huge step. We were very, very happy to see occur, because then that does have the smaller banks and the community banks down in Sumter or across South Carolina able to get their applications into SBA, hopefully get those in line ahead of just the Bank of America's and Wells Fargo's flooding the system per se. So I do think, should there be a phase 4, which it seems like will happen, I do think we'll see some provisions that will ensure more of the money is going to these smaller mom and pop restaurants in these communities, and even a lot of the more underserved communities as well. I know there's been a lot of talk on getting, well, just definitely ensuring the money is going to those communities as well. So I would look forward to that. However, the timeline is still all up in the air because, as the congressman mentioned, a lot of senators have and members, generally speaking, have said, well, let's just see where the money's going, how much money's left before we just start writing blank checks over and over and over again, just because we think that's what needs to occur. So I do think there will be a phase 4, and hopefully we can get it sooner than later. But yeah, the timeline is still kind of up in the air as well.
And just to add to what Jake said, here again, I think the system is correcting itself, if you will, because with those certification dates, originally May 7th, and then again now moved to May 14th, where these big businesses who receive the PPP money, when they have to certify to the United States Department of Treasury that they didn't have any other means of liquidity or borrowing power or assets to tap into, that's going to be a real obstacle. And that's why you see so many giving the money back, because it will not be forgiven, and they just can't afford it. So therefore, just by definition and by law, there's going to be money there that smaller businesses who don't have the capital saved or the assets to borrow against, they're going to have more access to this money. That's why you've seen so much of it slow down, whereas in the first 2 weeks, really actually not even 2 weeks, because it ran out Thursday about 11 o'clock in the morning. So it was only probably about 12 and a half, 13 days. And now we are almost here again, 2 weeks into it, and we've got 120 billion left. So people who need help can get help.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. Well, I know you guys are really, really busy, and I've got 2 other issues that wanted to mention to you that have been addressed by our membership. One is the legality side of this, both on a state as well as a federal level. Senator Graham mentioned with the South Carolina Chamber call about some type of tort reform that needs to come about to protect employers from a legal basis from just mass lawsuits. About with everything that's going on with all of this, and from employees or former employees. Even Sumter has recently, the Sumter Bar Association here has recently formed an ad hoc committee to assist local citizens with any legal issues on a pro bono basis. But on a state and federal level, what do you see needing to take place to protect the employer from these, just frivolous lawsuits that could be coming about once, or at any point in time, but even after the fact?
That's one thing that, it's there's a limited liability in the CARES Act, but you've got senators now who are wanting to, Jake was looking into this yesterday about making sure employers who hire employees back aren't sued and taken to court if a employee comes back and contracts the coronavirus. And they're lining up, unfortunately, the lawyers are lining up now to do that. I know one of the big industries in South Carolina called me for testing equipment. They want to test everybody that comes through their doors to make sure they don't bring virus with them inside the plant. So they're taking the precautions. But I haven't seen, Jake, have you seen the legislation that yesterday we heard about through Senator, I don't know, Senator Dane, I think.
It was Thune. I haven't seen it just yet. I think that may have been more on just a discussion level between, because he's the number 2 ranking Republican in the Senate behind Senator McConnell. And I know Senator McConnell and even GOP leader Kevin McCarthy in the House, that's kind of their red line or line in the sand or whatever you want to refer to it as, that's going to be their starting point on negotiations, is those liability protections for business owners moving forward. Obviously, our colleagues on the other side of the aisle don't want to see that included. But then again, they're going to need 60 votes in the Senate, regardless of what bill comes forward. So Republicans have been adamant, particularly Senator McConnell, have been adamant about including that in a phase 4 moving forward. But then again, this is all still kind of preliminary in discussion. The timeline is still up in the air. But one thing I did want to mention, Chris, just kind of touching on that PPP before we move off that subject entirely, is, and Kathy Rose and the Congressman may have mentioned it, but when we have businesses do apply with their lender or PayPal or whomever that may be, we please just encourage everyone to have all of their ducks in order, have all of their paperwork lined up and good to go. I know Kathy Rose and I have spoken to a number of people who have called in frustrated because they have to keep going back and forth with their bank, which obviously delays the process of them getting in line and getting that application submitted. So I just wanted to say that before we moved off PPP entirely. Just please encourage everyone to have all their ducks in order.
Thank you, Jake. Okay, and my last issue to cover is that, obviously our first responders are always heroes in our everyday life, but they've really been the heroes during this pandemic from a healthcare standpoint. And several questions have come about from our healthcare community in regards to the trials and the obstacles that they've been facing to be able to provide care to the people that are coming down with this disease, as well as the testing side of it and the being able to staff the amount of people that are dealing with this. One concern that was shared to us, and I want to get y'all's feedback on, is there's been a proposed cut from the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services starting in 2021 of 8% to healthcare providers, and apparently that's scary a lot of people in our community that provide health care, both hospitals and family care and things like that. Is there anything you can talk about that, as far as that cut, and if it's something that's being discussed as far as possibly alleviating that?
Yeah, in the budget committee, we hadn't taken that up yet. And I've heard the talk has been 12%, if not greater, which is really going to put a lot of healthcare providers in trouble, particularly some of the rural hospitals. But I haven't heard the legislation, Jake, unless you have, or Kathy Rose.
No, this was more so a regulation that would come down the pipe from CMS specifically on, and I think, Chris, you're referring to the DSH cuts, the DSH cuts for hospitals. Yeah, there was a delay that was set to kick in. It actually was set to kick in January 2020, but they ended up pushing that back from the omnibus from last year that Congress passed and delayed it. I want to say until either May or November of this year. I'd have to double check, and I can get you that information. But yeah, there's been ongoing discussions about maintaining that. But since they started talking about it, and since CMS kind of implemented that proposed regulation, they've delayed that cut over and over again. So, and I think because of kind of the impact that we've seen on our frontline workers in hospitals and medical professionals, and this is just my assumption, I don't want to speak on behalf of anyone, but I would assume, and I could see them delaying that DSH cut payment yet again because of the impact the hospitals have had because of COVID-19. But then again, that's all a CMS proposed regulation. Nothing's taken effect yet, but they have, Congress has kept delaying that over and over again recently.
I concur with Jake. When I talk with hospitals and Medicare and all that, it was just in conversation. Neither side was sure where anything was going, and then with the virus, it has added an entirely new layer or dimension, and I think that conversation has been pushed out.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much. Well, guys, that kind of covers the questions that we had received prior to this. And Congressman, I know you're busy, and you and your staff are busy, and we greatly appreciate you taking some time out of your morning to spend with us. And I want to give a quick shout out to Austin, who I know has joined us on this. He was vital in the coordination of this conference call. So, Austin, thank you very much for your assistance and getting on the congressman's schedule. So, yep, there he is right there. Okay. Again,
Chris,
yeah, but go ahead.
Chris, can I just jump in real quick?
Sure.
If anyone needs any help with anything, if they will go to Congressman Norman's website and under Serving You, go down and under Constituent Services, if they will email us, we will absolutely respond and address their needs. They can also call our Rock Hill office at 803-327-1114. That's for a question, that's for unemployment, that's for PPP, EIDL, anything to do with the federal government. We are here to serve Congressman Norman and his constituencies. Okay?
And Chris, let me add to what Kathy Rose said. If y'all would like, if it would benefit Sumter to do another Zoom meeting with having all of our staff on, be more than happy to do that. It's confusing, and it's like Jake said, for people to get their ducks in a row when they're submitting an application. You know, the businesses are used to making a product. They're used to, performing a service for a fee. And this is going to be the new normal as we move forward. And the banks have got to have all this. So, but bottom line, if you want us to help, if this would benefit your customers, as Kathy Rose said, we're more than willing to do another one of these with whoever you would suggest, and then contact the numbers that she has given out. If not,
well, I appreciate that, and we're probably going to take you up on it, because I'm sure this is going to last further than anybody wants it to. In some form or fashion. So, and the impact on the, our business community here is going to last long past all restrictions are lifted. So we'll definitely take you up on that. Well, Congressman, before we let you go, do you have any final words you'd like to share?
Well, I just, as we go through this, the new normal is something we're going to have to live with all over this country. No one will go back to work being the same person that he was, both from his job scope of services that he's providing, the precautions we're going to have to take. And I guess the other thing I would say is we've got to set priorities on where our dollars will go. I mean, getting our small businesses back up and running and opening in Sumter, as well as all over the state's a priority, getting them back on their feet. No one will be the same. No one will have the spendable money that they had prior to this. But it just goes to the fact that, and I've said this over and over, the one good thing that comes out of all this, the sweatshop labor, cheap labor in China is not so cheap. And we got to get self-sufficient now.
Well, one more question, and I'd be remiss if I didn't mention this, and the is kind of a self-advocating, but one of the things that in regards to the payroll protection programs is that, and not so much us, we have been very fortunate, with the support of our membership here in Sumter, but a lot of chambers of commerce have really suffered throughout the country. And I believe Senator Cruz sponsored a bill to include chambers of commerce in the the allowable nonprofits to receive payroll protection funding. Because right now 501c6s, which all chambers of commerce are excluded from that. And I know there's some talk about getting them included in any future bills. Is there anything you can provide as far as assistance? Because like I said, chambers of commerce, I read yesterday where a couple of chambers of commerce actually had to close their doors and shut down because of this. Now, granted, a lot of them were not very financial stable prior to the pandemic, but I think this was kind of the final nail in the coffin, if you would. Do you know if there's been any progress for that conversation?
No, the talk has been there.
Okay.
But I think even as we go forward, most chambers are supported by the businesses.
Yeah.
I mean, y'all get your business oriented, and the top priority is getting the businesses back in operation so they can pay the dues to the chamber. And a lot of the chambers are suffering, and they're going to have to, I mean, it's an issue that they're going to face not just for the rest of this year, but probably next year. And the lifeline that the PPP and the EIDL loans are providing are just that, a short-term lifeline that just to get them back open. But I know Cruz has put that on the table. We haven't seen it. I think what you'll see, though, is when all the money's depleted out of this round 2, then we'll see that being addressed as far as how to specifically spend if any more money is allocated.
Okay. Well, Congressman, again, thank you so much for taking your time, and we will take you up again on a future Zoom meeting maybe in the next couple of weeks once the phase 2 is ruled out and kind of see how everything goes. But again, thank you. God bless you. We're praying for you guys and the decisions y'all make. I know none of them are easy, but thank you and your staff for y'all's time this morning.
My pleasure. Thank you.